It's pretty common knowledge that Madoka Magica takes plenty of visual and narrative inspiration from classical shoujo and magical girl anime that came before it. And as I go through Revolutionary Girl Utena for the first time, it becomes clear just how favored this one is above all else. I can't claim to talk about the deeper levels of symbolism and imagery yet, as I'm just not far enough in. But with my surface level reading and knowledge, I think I've got a case to make regarding one of our most beloved classic cast members who we still don't really know a lot about, and that's the very first primary antagonist of the show, the witch known as Gertrud. Yeah, I don't know much about Utena's greater lore just yet, but this has been nagging me for a while and I just gotta talk about it. Maybe I'll come back to this, or this could inspire someone who knows more about Utena to explore it more than me, but right now I just gotta get these thoughts out of my head, man. That, and I already saved the thumbnail before writing this, so yeah, sorry Anthe, your name's getting used as clickbait so I can yap about Gertrude. That said, I'm not going to waste her mention. Let's get the first and most obvious point out of the way. Gertrude is the Rose Garden Witch, and Anthe Himemiya holds the title of the Rose Bride. Roses are an important visual motif within Utena, so I believe that it was a very intentional decision to make Gertrude's design based around a rose garden, and that it served as an Easter egg to Utena. But let's take a look at what we know about Gertrude. She's an isolationist, and her nature is that of distrustfulness. The thing she cares about the most is her rose garden, only ever putting in effort to protect the roses she takes care of. Lastly, although her barrier naturally pulls people in, she actually hates it when other humans invade her space due to fear of ruining her garden. In Magia Exeter, we also learn an additional piece of information from the latest Christmas event. Gertrude is envious when she sees families, lovers, and friends, and she ends up hurting people seemingly by accident as a result. So, from what I understand about Anthe, she's a very isolated person emotionally and socially. As I recall, the very first scene of her even has her tending to flowers inside of a greenhouse inside the school. As the Rose Bride, Anthe is unable to express her own autonomy as a person without the permission of her current fiancé. I don't know the full extent of this yet or why Anthe is the Rose Bride, but I do understand that she is connected to the greater state of the world within Utena. To me, Anthe would be the kind of person who would become naturally suspicious of anyone if she were to break free of the responsibility of being the Rose Bride. Her whole life so far seems to be dictated and controlled by the whims of others, and change only comes about because of Utena stepping in as her new fiancé. So what I'm picturing here so far when considering what Gertrude's magical girl might have been like is someone fairly similar to how I currently understand Anthe. Labyrinths reflect the specific trauma and wishes of the girl who becomes a witch, and labyrinths also tend to reflect the environment in which they are born. Remember the nature of Octavia's labyrinth when it first appeared? It has an environment based on the train station where Sayaka was as she fell to despair. So if Gertrude's labyrinth is a rose garden, it stands to reason she might have fallen to despair in a garden or a greenhouse or while doing something with flowers, and in particular something to do with roses. Her specific trauma would be related to her nature, which as we established is classified as distrustfulness. Her distrust is levied specifically at humans who intrude on her space, and most recently we learned that a deep-seated envy of connections between people is another facet of her character. Combining these, it seems clear that in her human life, Gertrude could have been a girl who was isolated in some way, whether literally or metaphorically. Maybe she was in an abusive family or relationship that made her feel isolated from others. Maybe she was betrayed by a friend. The point is, there is a lot about her nature that makes us want to immediately associate her with a betrayal of some kind. Unfortunately, this is where I'm going to have to leave the Anthe comparison for now until I continue getting through Utena, but we still have some more to extrapolate about our beloved Rose Garden Witch. There's good reason to believe that Gertrude was inspired by the character Gertrud from Hamlet, the mother of the play's namesake prince. If there's anything that scholars would tell you about Queen Gertrude, it is that she is one of the most widely debated of Shakespeare's characters due to the nature of how ambiguous she is in the play. Actually, not too dissimilar from the witch we're discussing, and also how I feel about Anthe with what I know. She seems to be written deliberately ambiguously to set up for whatever comes later in the story. One of the parts of Queen Gertrud's character that is up for debate is whether or not she was an adulterous woman. Was she sleeping with Claudius during her relationship with King Hamlet? Some evidence points towards it. Parts of the story suggest she is guilty of adultery, something which the ghost of the king suggests she will be punished for in heaven. We don't care about that aspect here. What we want to focus on is the smaller detail which we can confirm, which is that Prince Hamlet feels that Queen Gertrude is betraying the memory of his father by marrying Claudius so soon after his death. If we look at the witch Gertrude, we are reminded about her envy and bitterness towards people who have connections. Perhaps this is firstly a reference to Queen Gertrude's debated betrayal and adultery, and secondly, perhaps a hint or confirmation about the nature of her fall to despair as a magical girl. Maybe she was betrayed or betrayed someone, and either the anger she felt at being betrayed corrupted her, or the guilt of doing so and being caught was the cause of her fall. Another aspect of Queen Gertrude ironically makes me think back to Anthe, which only further convinces me of my suspicion about her link to the witch. We need to look at the context of why Queen Gertrude is portrayed the way she is, and it has to do with the era when the play takes place, which is during the Renaissance period, sometime in the 17th century. During the play, a major point of contention is that between Prince Hamlet and his mother, Queen Gertrude, with the prince feeling angered that his mother would move on so soon. With no context, we are led to sympathize with Hamlet in this early stage of the narrative. However, we need to consider Queen Gertrude's options as a woman during this time of history. Noble or not, Queen Gertrude would likely not have had options to actually maintain her power and independence. Marriage to the next in line to the throne was the only realistic way to keep her status and few rights she had as a woman during this era, where otherwise as a widow she may not have been afforded such status. For example, it is likely that Claudius would have been able to usurp her by marrying another woman. From Georgetown University, Women in the Renaissance: The Impact of a Flourishing Culture on Women in 15th Century Florence. Though the Renaissance was a time of immense cultural change, life for women during this period was not easy. As children, parents controlled girls, and then, at the time of marriage, women were given to men who would control them as adults. In addition, dowries and marriage negotiations were a critical element of finding a proper husband. So, throughout their lives, women were considered the property of their fathers, their husbands, or the most powerful male figure in their lives. I don't need to spell this out. Queen Gertrude would have to stay beholden to the throne if she wanted to maintain her power and her son's position as prince, and outside of it she would have likely been stripped of her rights after being usurped and become the property of some other man regardless of her choice. In much the same way, we see Anthe Himemia in a similar position where she is more or less the property of whoever her current fiancé is, and even though she is the victim of male aggression, she seems to have no choice but to remain as the Rose Bride. With everything else connecting these two to Gertrude the Witch, it makes me wonder if perhaps her magical girl was in a very similar position, just in a more practical modern setting. While it is very rare, there is still a practice of arranged marriage in Japanese culture. Perhaps Gertrude's magical girl was in an arranged marriage, one she didn't agree with, and this is where her distrust and envy arises from. Queen Gertrude is indeed the victim of male aggression in the play, always subservient and portrayed as weak simply because she is a woman, and the one time she shows an act of rebellion it results in her own death. Claudius poisons a glass of wine intended to be drunk by Prince Hamlet, but Queen Gertrude takes it instead, even saying she hopes for Claudius's mercy for disobeying his order not to drink the wine. If the witch Gertrude is intended to be a parallel to Queen Gertrude, this is really fitting to make her the first major antagonist of a story such as this one. Kyubey appears before vulnerable girls, girls who more often than not are in positions where making their own decisions is not available to them due to a number of reasons. By signing a contract with Kyubey, a magical girl surrenders herself to a fate not unlike Queen Gertrude. They drink the metaphorical wine that is the act of becoming a magical girl while being unaware of the poison inside, the true nature of Kyubey's goal. And then we have her minions, Anthony and Adalbert, who actually debut before Gertrud herself. There's some interesting stuff here too with these minions that is worthy of further discussion. It is commonly believed that Anthony is named as a reference to the Greek word for flowers, anthos, which for a time was incorrectly believed to be the origin of the name Anthony in the 16th century. This, coincidentally enough, may also be the origin of Anthe's name. Anthony is derived from Antonius and generally means priceless, fitting for a name in conjunction with Gertrude and her rose garden, as the witch herself holds the flowers in high regard, and Anthony's role in the labyrinth is to take care of the roses and defend them from intruders. Adalbert is a bit more straightforward etymologically, as it translates roughly to noble and bright and serves as an origin for the name Albert in more modern times. That said, there was a patron saint who held the name Adalbert, who I believe to be the point of origin for this name and might give us more insight into Gertrude's potential character. Firstly, I do believe Saint Adalbert of Prague to be the inspired namesake of the minion, as both Adalbert and Anthony feature prominent facial hair as parts of their design, and historical depictions of Saint Adalbert show that he had a beard and mustache. As a boy, the saint was struck with a fatal illness. His parents are said to have prayed to the Holy Virgin and vowed to offer their son to the priesthood were he to recover. As the story goes, their prayers were answered, and the young Adalbert was sent from his noble home in Bohemia to the northern region of Magdeburg in Germany, where his education was overseen by the archbishop of the region. If you look at what we have here, before we even go any further into St. Adalbert's biography, we can identify a theme consistent with what we have already pointed out as Gertrude's likely history, and that is the idea that her struggles were with autonomy and dealing with the choices of others. While I am respectful to anyone who believes in the faith, I'm very critical of some religious practices, and the one which irks me the most is when parents bring their child into religion from a very young and impressionable age instead of letting them naturally discover if they want to follow religion or not. If the stories are accurate, Saint Adalbert's fate was decided upon by his parents without his knowledge, and because of the fact that he survived his illness, his parents took it as a sign to push him towards religion. Now, I'm not saying he would have never followed religion on his own. The problem is he didn't get the choice. And of course, his parents did not act out of malice. They naturally wanted their son to survive. I just think it's a very coincidental detail to find here given what we have possibly identified for Gertrude. Here's an extra detail I think is just as fascinating, though it doesn't have much significance to Gertrude specifically. St. Adalbert's day of commemoration is April 23rd. This might not seem like much on its own, but if Walpurgisnacht arrives on the real-world date of Walpurgisnight, which is April 30, I think it's very fascinating of a detail that the first major witch in the series has connection to a date that's so close in proximity to Walpurgisnight, and maybe it implies Gertrude holds more significance than most assume. This would explain why she shows up so much, and she seems to have nearly as many appearances as the Ultimate Witch. Well, there is definitely more we could extrapolate about Gertrude. I'm only scratching the surface here, but this week's videos aren't about super deep dives or crazy rabbit holes, so we gotta cut this one here for now. Though maybe I will come back to this topic in the future unless someone else out there wants to follow my lead and take a swing at talking about her. Gertrude is a character that I believe we still haven't properly ascertained the full importance of. She's obviously important due to how much she keeps appearing. Although I mostly used her name as clickbait, I think I'm onto something about the Anthe connection. A friend of mine who has seen all of Utena even gave me some positive feedback for the observations before scolding me and telling me to go finish Utena. Don't worry, Evelyn, I'm getting back to it soon. Well, while I worry about catching up on Utena, why don't you guys tell me your thoughts below? In the meantime, I'll see you all here again for tomorrow's video.